So welcome to Drum Geeks in the Shed. Just as this first edition, I thought we would talk about everyone's favourite subject, or certainly my favourite subject, which is snare drums. So, snare drums, what do you two look for in a snare drum?
Who you go first, Gareth?
You want me? I'm looking for something that has a wide tunable range, and something that can be played at low volume.
Right.
Okay.
Because the type of music you play
Because the type of music I like, and the music that I play, that suits.
So, certainly just in terms of the three examples we've got here, the middle one certainly wouldn't interest you because it's a bell brass.
Yes, no.
And yeah. So, do you have any specific sort of specs that you prefer for your snare drums?
I'm using a 400 at the moment.
Okay.
Ludwig 400. Love it. I would be looking for something probably 14 inch.
Okay.
Probably about 5.5.
Right.
I use my 400 all the time. Very interested to try some wooden ones, just to see that little bit of a warmer sound.
Same size.
Same size, just wooden. Try get a little bit
So
of a warmer
what
sound.
is it about 14 5.5 that you particularly like?
I just like the size.
You just like the size. It just works.
I like the size. It just works. I find a 13, if you're playing cross stick, is just too small for me. 13. I know some people like a 12. It's even smaller.
I actually spent a little bit of time, certainly around 1995. I spent a bit of time using 12s.
Okay.
And I kind of favoured a 12x7, but my current favour is actually 14 6.5 these days. And in fact, the majority of the snare drums in here are probably 14 6.5.
Yeah.
But I just like the extra body really, or I'd say 14 6.5 mostly. But if it's a 14x7, I'm not going to get too.
Yeah, I mean, if I was recording and I was recording a more kind of pop rock thing, I would definitely play a deeper snare drum, and I would definitely tune it lower,
Right.
for recording. But when playing jazz, crank it right up.
Okay.
Crank it right up.
14 by 5.5 or 6.5 usually. I played the 12 inches. I've had the Dennis Chambers, I think it's a soprano snare drum in the.
In fact, actually, in '95 when I first started using 12s, that was the snare drum.
Yeah, it was great.
I've still got it.
I was hoping that I might sound like Dennis Chambers with it, but it didn't happen. So I prefer to use 14 by 5.5, which I have as a Pearl Maple Masters, again from the 90s. That seems to be a good all-round snare drum. I have used the piccolo snare drums as well, the Pearl ones again in the early 90s, but I've always gone back and favoured the Maple 14 and 6.5. Find it versatile enough, by 5.5 sorry, versatile enough, loud enough when you want it to be, and it can be delicate when you need it to be as well, but mostly the kind of pop and rock stuff is ideal for that.
So in terms of the actual physical drum, do you have any? Do you both have sort of specific preferences? Do you have like an 8-lug drum or a 10-lug drum, or you know? I mean, most companies have their own sort of signature lug, and obviously here, DW being the classic example of the turret lug, which they sort of borrowed, appropriated from Camco, but. You know, you've got the signature lug there. I mean, do you care about any of that stuff? Do you care about the hoops? I mean, I know you obviously like the S hoop, but do you care with your stuff whether you have a triple flanged or you have like a
not particularly
die cast?
Not particularly.
Okay.
I'm like, it's a drum. If I hit it and it sounds good, I'm happy.
You're fine. Okay.
But here's a question for you. You've obviously got loads of snare drums. Do you notice a difference between a 10-lug drum and an 8-lug drum? In the ease of tuning or anything like that? Do you notice a difference?
I think in terms of tuning, possibly that's the only time I'm likely to notice it. In terms of playing it, no, not particularly. I notice more. I mean, it depends on what I'm doing, but I notice more with the type of hoop. That's on it.
So how do they differ for you?
For me personally, like I did a couple of gigs at the weekend that were outside, and for an outside gig, I actually prefer a die-cast hoop. Alternatively, just as a sort of loose alternative to that, the DW True hoop, which is the 3mm triple flanged hoop. So it's the same basic design as this, being a triple flange, but it's a lot thicker because this will be like a 1.6 mil, and I think that's probably a 2.3, and I'm not sure what that'll be a 2.3 as well. But the die-cast hoop for me, just when I'm playing outside, I can lay into it. I have utter confidence in both the physical aspects of the drum, of the hoop. It's not going to bend, it's not going to break, it's not going to get warped if I hit it too hard. So I can play into it. It gives a nice dry sound, but at the same time it also gives a little bit more sort of punch to the overall sort of sound of the drum. Because if I'm rim shotting all of the time, then you get certainly a much more full sound. Yeah. With a die-cast hoop. And I mean, I actually prefer. I know obviously I said that I prefer like a 14 6.5 anyway for just for sort of general playing. It does vary on the venue that I'm playing in, but for me, a 14 by 6.5 metal drum just for playing outside with die-cast hoop or maybe a true hoop, be absolutely perfect. Yeah.
So that was going to be my next question. Was if you're playing outside, indoors in a marquee, your choice of snare drum will change depending on the venue, the room.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and I appreciate I'm in a slightly strange position to be able to accommodate the room in that way. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I did a gig in a small room in a pub on last Friday, and I took a completely inappropriate drum, which was actually this one.
The loudest drum known to man.
Which for the sake of the audio side of this, is actually a 14 by 5 drum workshop bell brass.
You need some guns to lift that,
which is extremely heavy. Yeah, which is an extremely heavy drum, and in terms of just the sort of the sound, it was great because it's not the quietest of bands, but at the same time it's kind of, I want something that's actually because this is a fundamentally a ringy sound and a ringy shell or ringy drum. It actually kind of works with the band itself, which is a ska band.
How thick is it?
3mm shell. So that's the other thing, in terms of playing outside, that's the other thing, or one of the other things that I really I mean, I'm kind of into thicker shells at the moment. I've got a few bell brass which are all 3mm. The Tico Torres free floater is a 3mm aluminium shell. I've got a couple of custom, the Providence, certainly one of the Providence snares is a thick cast aluminium shell, and I'm kind of liking that thicker shell at the moment. I think it may be just a fad with me, but like it's just I find with this, but actually particularly this drum, if you hit the drum just right, sort of around the outer part of the head, it gives a lovely pure ring, and the whole thing sort of. I mean, I could use this drum outside, and not really worry too much, but that's because it's got a lot of the attributes that I really like the thicker shell, the slightly sort of heavier hoop. So the only drum that would be the caveat to what I just said is basically the Highwood Hallmark, which is the 14 by 4 solid aluminium shell. It's inch thick solid aluminium shell. Because whilst that obviously it's a 14 by 4, so it'll give a higher pitch. It doesn't feel like a piccolo in any way, shape or form. And I've never been a huge fan of piccolos. I've got more piccolos now than I did, say, 10 years ago, and I enjoy playing them as well a whole lot more. But yeah, that Highwood kind of just doesn't. It feels more. It just feels right playing outside. Because it gives me again that solid sort of feedback through my stick, that I found that kind of can be lacking if I don't sort of pick the right drum for playing outside. So we've covered, obviously we've covered hoops, we've covered the strainer. Do any of you have like preferences in terms of snare wires?
Not particularly. I mean, for me, if it sounds good, it works.
So you playing, you being a lighter player and playing sort of jazzier stuff, have you tried 42s?
No. Should I?
It'll give you a more sensitive sound.
Okay.
Or more, more sensitive. Well, yeah, I mean, give you a more sensitive, sort of snarey tone. But you got any preferences at all? You don't care?
Not really. No, I do care. I mean, it's a kind of case if it, like with the throw-offs, if they work, they work. They're always good until you play one that is bad. If you have a share kit or something like that, you kind of take for granted that your throw-offs always feel good. But snare-wise, not really. No. I've played some cheap snare drums, £200 that I've really enjoyed, and I've played some snare drums that are £1,000, but they've all got good and bad points with them.
Yeah. How easy would it be? Do you need a special snare bed or anything like that to fit 42-inch wires for bigger snare wires?
I mean, on this, the snare bed's it really only sitting there, so
yeah.
I mean that's wide enough to accommodate 42s. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, I came across, or rather, we came across one year a fella making drums who he said he'd been a drummer for, he'd been sort of playing for 30 odd years, never realised of a snare bed, and this was a guy that was making drums.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, obviously, if you want to put 42s on there, then
because they're going to be.
I mean, 42s are going to be out to about there or so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, arguably, you would possibly want a snare bed that's slightly wider or more tapered than this one. But, I mean, I think probably most snare drums you fit them on. But it's just a matter of whether they fit better on some drums than they do on others. One for you two guys. Favourite snare drums? I mean, obviously you said the one that you kind of like to use, but
having been here a few times,
turn that over.
Yeah, it's starting to
rattle away.
There was one you brought out, the Krav, and was it a 14?
You're gonna have to be a bit more specific.
I think it was a 4. I want to say it was a 14.8.
Oh right, that one. That was the hybrid one.
Yeah, I love that one.
It's probably actually behind the camera.
It's probably somewhere. It's definitely somewhere in here.
Yeah.
When I played that, I fell in love with it. Yeah. I fell in love with it. We had it tuned really low, and yeah, absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
So that must be up there. But then, kind of any of those Krav drums are really nice.
Just the wood ones,
just
solid
the wood
shell
ones.
ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wood.
Matt.
Tricky one really, because there's so many good snare drums out there. The Timer ones I've been impressed with recently. They're low end price ones. I think are pretty.
Oh, the SLP
amazing.
or the Metalworks and stuff.
Really good. Difficult to say. I think any maple snare drum I think sounds pretty good with some good heads on, bit of time tuning. Again, depending on where you're playing and what you're playing, what sticks you're using, I think you can pretty much make a lot of snare drums sound good. But I think, I don't know. I know most people always put out their Black Beauty as their go-to snare drum, but I say I don't really have a go-to snare drum. And sometimes I think you just want to have a different sound take to a gig. You're not being recorded as playing. It's just nice to take some different snare drums and see what sounds best on the night.
Yeah,
cool.
Really.
I mean, if you can't get, can you get a good snare drum sound out of a £200? And is there a difference to that snare drum sound to
I think
to £1,000 one?
That's a whole different.
It's a whole nother kettle of fish, as we spoke about earlier. But yeah, certainly you can get a great sound out of a £150 drum, and obviously you can get a great sound out of a £5,000 drum.
Yeah.
So I think as long as you're happy with what you've got and your sound and it's
and how you play it.
Yeah.
As well, really.
Put decent heads on it, tune it well. I mean, I think the most important thing is learn to tune.
Yeah.
And if you can get decent heads on it and you can tune it well, then it's going to sound pretty good.
Definitely.
Right. Well, thank you for watching. Hope that was some fun, and I'll see you next time.